Poor girl was drugged and woke up as the billionaire CEO's wife. Now the whole city talks. She woke up with a headache and a stranger's breath beside her. Her dress was gone, her memories too, and in the silence she did what broken girls learn to do. She demanded money, not answers. But instead of shame, he offered her a contract. 1 night a week, no touching, just sleep. He said he hadn't slept in 10 years, not until her. That's how their story began. Not with a kiss, but with silence, cold sheets, and a man who dreamed of her long before she ever knew him. The night that changed everything. There are nights that shimmer with magic, and then there are nights that steal everything. She woke up to the sound of her own heartbeat. Her head pounded, her mouth tasted of metal. The bed sheets were silk, too soft, too foreign, and the air smelled expensive. Then she turned and saw him. A man in a white shirt, sleeves rolled, tie loosened, watching her, calm, silent, like this wasn't strange for him at all. Her breath caught. "Why am I here?" "You brought yourself here," he said, voice low, unreadable. I whispered, clutching the covers. "I don't remember anything. You took advantage." "I didn't touch you," he cut in. "You were drugged, but not by me." That should have brought her relief. It didn't. Because nothing made sense. The pain in her head, the wine she barely touched, the party she never wanted to attend. "I want money," she said suddenly, her voice broken but brave. "Whatever this was, it ends now." He tilted his head. "How much does forgetting cost these days?" She flinched. 1,000, she said. Her cheeks burned. She hated herself for the number, for even naming a price. But this wasn't about dignity anymore. It was survival. Rent was due. Her little brother's school fees. Her job, gone after last night's scandal. 5, he repeated, amused. "Sleep beside me and name a number." 20? I said 5, she snapped. But then he did something strange. He stood, walked to the window, and for a long moment just stared at the skyline. "I haven't slept in 10 years, he said quietly. "Not a full night, not one." She frowned. "What does that have to do with me?" "Last night, I slept." And then he turned to her, that same cool gaze locking with hers. "So, I'm making you an offer. Not for sex, not for silence. For sleep." She blinked. "What kind of offer?" "Night a week. You sleep in my bed. Nothing else. I pay triple your old salary. You never ask questions, and you never fall in love with me." A laugh slipped from her lips, dry and bitter. "You think I'd fall in love with you?" "I think," he said, walking toward her, "that people ruin the simplest things by wanting more." She should have walked out. She should have reported him. She should have cried. But instead, she sat there, wrapped in sheets that weren't hers, in a world that had never made space for her, and whispered, "Why do I start?" That's how it began. Not with roses, not with fate, but with a contract written in exhaustion, pain, and 2 people who didn't believe in love. She left the hotel that morning in silence, her shoes in her hand, shame in her bones. She didn't know his name, only that he was powerful, dangerous, and had eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to feel. And he, Grayson Ward, billionaire CEO of Ward Enterprises, watched her disappear into the cold morning fog and muttered to himself, 10 years. And she doesn't remember me at all. Chapter 1. The Night with No Memory. It rained that morning, the kind of Atlanta rain that blurred windows and buried sound. Jenna Cross stood beneath the awning of a coffee shop, arms wrapped tight around her chest, watching taxis slash through puddles like blades. She had no umbrella, no memory, and no idea how she got here. The card in her hand was heavy black, no name, just a silver symbol etched into it like a secret. Below it, scrawled in thick pen, "Ward Tower, 10 a.m. Don't be late, GW." She almost threw it in the street. Almost. But when you're broke, jobless, and one false accusation away from total collapse, you don't throw away second chances, even strange, unbelievable ones. By 9:58 a.m., she stood in the marble lobby of Ward Enterprises, stomach hollow, blazer still damp. The receptionist didn't blink when she gave her name, just handed her a guest badge and directed her to the 47th floor. The elevator felt like an execution. When the doors opened, he was already waiting. Grayson Ward, the man from the hotel, the stranger with insomnia, the man she might have slept beside, or worse. He wore the same calm expression, the same immaculate suit. Only his tie had changed, navy blue now, with a single silver pin at the knot. "I see you came," he said, rising from behind a desk that looked carved from obsidian. "I need the money," Jenna replied, lifting her chin. "Let's not pretend it's anything else." His lips curved, not a smile, more like a confirmation. "Send on adventure," he said. And she did, her spine straight. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, to run, but necessity was louder. "I don't sleep," he said, folding his hands. "Doctors, pills, meditation, none of it worked. But when you were beside me, I did. For 7 hours. Dreamless. Peaceful." "You don't even know me," she said softly. He looked at her then, really looked. "On the contrary," he said, "I know you better than you think." She blinked, but before she could ask, he slid a folder across the desk. "Sign this. 1 night a week, you'll be compensated accordingly. No physical contact, no questions, no falling in love." Jenna stared at the contract. "And if I say no? No, I'll find someone else," he said smoothly. "But I won't sleep." Silence filled the office like fog. Jenna picked up the pen. She signed. The first night, she didn't sleep at all. She lay on the edge of the bed in his penthouse, fully clothed, curled into herself like armor. Grayson lay on the opposite side, already breathing evenly. As promised, he didn't touch her. He just rested. And for hours, Jenna stared at the ceiling, wondering what kind of man could fall asleep beside a woman whose name he barely used. What kind of woman agrees to a deal like this? But she needed the money. Not for shopping, not for pride. For her brother's tuition, for her mother's hospital bills, for the life that kept falling apart every time she tried to tape it back together. At 3:41 a.m., she finally drifted off. And for the first time in weeks, the dreams didn't chase her. The days blurred into rhythm. Monday morning's coffee runs, Tuesday night's sleep contract, Thursday boardroom assistant. She was never more than 5 feet from Grayson Ward, and yet she never felt further from knowing him. He spoke in clipped phrases, praised with nods, criticized in silence. But then there were moments, fleeting, strange moments. Like when she spilled coffee on his suit, and he didn't flinch, just handed her his jacket and said, "You're shaking, sit down." Or when he overheard her on the phone with the hospital and, without a word, cleared her medical debt by morning. She tried to thank him. He waved her off. "Gratitude makes things messy," he said. "Let's not be messy." But one evening, as they rode the elevator down from a shareholder event, something changed. Jenna leaned against the mirrored wall, heels in her hand, exhausted. "I'm not falling in love with you," she murmured, half asleep. "Just so we're clear." Grayson turned to her. His reflection caught the light, soft, almost human. "I'm not asking you to," he said, "but you already did, once." Her eyes snapped open. He didn't answer, just walked out when the doors slid open. Left her standing there, stunned, breathless, and suddenly afraid. Because what if the stranger from that night wasn't a stranger at all? What if he had known her, long before she ever knew him? Chapter 2. Sleep contract. Jenna Cross had signed her name to things before, job offers, leases, prescriptions, but nothing had ever felt like this. This wasn't a contract, it was a line in the sand. She stared at the marble clock in Grayson Ward's penthouse as the second hand ticked toward 10:00 p.m., her first official shift. Not as an employee, not as a girlfriend. As what? a hired shadow in the night, a heartbeat in the dark, a remedy for a man who hadn't slept in a decade. He emerged from the hallway, shirt untucked, cufflinks in one hand. His usual sleek armor, the power suit, the watch that could buy a car, had been traded for simplicity. A navy Henley, soft, quiet, like the storm had calmed. "You came," he said. "I said I would." Jenna's voice was steady, but her fingers fidgeted at her side. "This isn't romantic. You know that, right?" He tilted his head. "Romance keeps me awake." She rolled her eyes and stepped past him, heading for the guest room she used to change. Not that it mattered. They didn't touch. That was rule number 1. Rule number 2, no talking once the lights were off. Rule number 3, no touching, not even by accident. Rule number 4, no questions, especially about the past. By 10:10 p.m., she was in the bed. He joined 2 minutes later, never speaking. But this night felt different. Not because of the bed or the money, because Jenna was starting to notice details. How he never faced her when he slept, how he wore the same faint cologne, cedarwood and rain, how he always sighed, just once, as he drifted off, like letting go was still foreign. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling. "What did you mean?" she whispered. "That I already loved you once?" A beat of silence. "You broke rule 4, he murmured beside her. "I know." He exhaled slowly. Not annoyed, not angry. Just tired. "I meant what I said," he finally replied. "You loved me once, a long time ago. You just didn't know it." Jenna turned her head. "Is this some twisted test?" "No," he said. "It's memory." She didn't answer. Neither did he. But sometime between the silence and the truth, she heard it. His breathing deepened, slowed. He was asleep. And beside him, Jenna lay wide awake, suddenly terrified that she'd stepped into a story that had started without her. The next morning, she found a gift on her desk at Ward Enterprises. A plain envelope. Inside, a hospital bill, paid in full. No note, no signature. Just a silver W stamped on the bottom corner. And she walked into his office without knocking. "What is this?" she demanded, slapping the paper on his desk. Grayson didn't look up. "A reimbursement. Consider it interest on your time." It wasn't part of the deal. "You needed help. "I didn't ask for help." Now he looked up. "No," he said. "But you didn't walk away either." His voice was unreadable, but his eyes, they softened. Just a fraction, just enough. "Jenna," he said quietly, "you've been surviving for so long, you don't even recognize kindness when it doesn't come with a price tag." She swallowed hard. "And what do you want in return?" He stood, walked around the desk and faced her, closer than he'd ever been. "Once in my life," he said, "I want sleep, and maybe not to be alone while I do." Jenna froze. Because for a man like him, that was the most intimate thing of all. Their second night together passed in silence, but something had shifted. Grayson's hand brushed hers when he turned in his sleep. He didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. The third night, she brought tea, chamomile, her grandmother's favorite. He didn't thank her, but he drank every drop. The fourth night, she arrived late, drenched from a thunderstorm, makeup smudged. "You could have called a driver," he said, towel in hand. "I don't take rides from strangers," she replied. "I'm not a stranger." "No?" she asked. "Then tell me what I'm doing here." I paused. "You're saving me," he said, "whether you mean to or not." 2 weeks passed. Then 3. And somewhere in that space between midnight and morning, she realized the contract was no longer about sleep. It was about proximity, about the kind of nearness that didn't need words. Grayson was still cold, by day commanding, silent, unreachable. But at night, he breathed. With her. And sometimes, in the quiet, she thought she saw it. A man who knew loneliness like she knew shame. But on the fourth week, something shattered. Press got a tip. A USB had been stolen from Ward Enterprises. Confidential data. And the footage showed Jenna in the hallway, bag open. The arrest was swift, brutal, public. Grayson didn't show up at the police station. He didn't return her calls. He didn't respond to her lawyer. For 3 days, she sat in a cold cell, heart unraveling, wondering if she had been a fool. Then, on the fourth day, he appeared. Black suit, rain-soaked shoulders, no expression. He handed the officer a folder. "Security footage from the West Corridor," he said. "You missed the switch." 10 minutes later, she was free. He never said a word, just opened the umbrella and waited. In the silence between them, she finally broke. "You let me rot in there?" "I was gathering proof." "I trusted you," she said, voice trembling. He looked at her eyes, darker than she'd ever seen. "I trusted you wouldn't run." They stared at each other in the storm. Neither of them moved. Until, quietly, he said, "You're not just saving me anymore, Jenna." Pause. "I think you're remembering." Chapter 3. The Girl with Scars. Ward Tower was a cathedral of glass and ambition. People whispered Jenna Cross's name like it was a curse or a warning, soft enough to deny but sharp enough to wound. She heard it in elevators, felt it in the pauses after laughter. That's her. The one from the USB scandal? Once she slept her way into the CEO's penthouse. She's still working here? Must be something he sees in her. Jenna kept her head down. To let them talk. They hadn't been the ones in a holding cell for a crime they didn't commit. They didn't know the sting of betrayal or the humiliation of being fingerprinted while reporters shouted your name. She walked through the office like a ghost who remembered what it was like to be loved, and now only haunted by the idea. And the worst part? Grayson never said a word. He cleared her name. He stood by her legally. But emotionally? No apology, no conversation, no explanation for why he waited 3 days. He just resumed the contract 1 night a week. No touching, no questions, just silence. And silence, Jenna had learned, was the most expensive thing of all. Friday, 11:27 p.m. She lay awake in his bed again, this time facing the window, watching lightning thread the Atlanta sky. Behind her, Grayson slept, or pretended to. She wanted to speak, to scream, to demand why he hadn't come sooner. Instead, she whispered, "I didn't know about the USB. I didn't steal anything." Pause. "I would have told you if you had just asked." He didn't answer. But after a long beat, she heard him shift behind her. The space between them grew smaller, barely an inch now. And his voice, low and bare, said, "I know." She turned, surprised. His eyes were open, and for once, they didn't look like steel. They looked tired. "I didn't believe it," he said. "Not for a second." "Then why didn't you come?" He exhaled, a sound like regret. "Because I needed to be sure, and if I had come too soon, I might have destroyed something I wasn't ready to lose." "Why was that?" "You," he said quietly. Jenna blinked. The words landed heavy and soft, like snow on fire. "I've been hurt too," he said, barely audible. "I've trusted people who smiled while they held the knife." She felt the sting in his words, the weight behind them. And in that moment, she understood. They were two people shaped by betrayal, by memory, by nights they couldn't erase. That Monday, the company held its quarterly board review, a high-stakes affair where reputations rose and fell on a slide deck and a smile. Jenna had been preparing her proposal for weeks, a new expansion plan for Ward Enterprises' sustainability division. Smart, cost-efficient, heartfelt. Grayson hadn't even glanced at it. "You'll present it to the board," he said flatly. "Not me." She blinked. "Alone? Alone? You want your name cleared? Then take the stage. It was brutal, but fair. Jenna stepped into the glass-walled conference room at 9:00, iron sharp, chin high, laptop in hand. The board members barely looked at her. A few even smirked at them. She clicked the first slide and began. She didn't rush, didn't fumble. She told them why the project mattered, why it would save the company money, why it would save lives. And when she finished, no one clapped. They just looked to Grayson, who hadn't said a word the whole time. He leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said, "She'll be heading the initiative. Effective immediate." Murmurs erupted. One director started. "I trust her," Grayson said. "You should too." That was it. Stamp, seal, power. Jenna stood frozen. Because in that moment, something shifted again. Not just in the boardroom, but inside her. This wasn't just a contract anymore. She mattered here. She had earned her place. That night, she didn't sleep. Neither did he. They lay in silence until 2:00 ION when Jenna finally sat up. "I do you do it?" she asked. What? What do you pay me to sleep beside you?" He was quiet for so long, she thought he'd ignore the question. Then softly, "We was 15. I watched my father die in front of me. Heart attack. Instant. We were fishing." She turned, breath caught. "We were the only one who ever made me feel safe," he said. "After that, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't trust the dark not to take something." Jenna's chest ached. "I've tried everything," he continued. "Therapists, pills, women, nothing worked." He looked at her. "Until you." She didn't know what to say, so she reached for his hand. But this time, he didn't pull away. But the next morning, the whispering returned. At the elevator, in the halls. "Did you hear about Jenna?" And found out who her father was. Jenna's blood ran cold. She knew that tone, that pause before a secret. She didn't wait. She stormed into HR, then legal, then the file was there. Her father, accused, never charged of harassment when she was 16. He died before the case closed. She'd buried it, changed her name, ran from it. But now someone had leaked it. By noon, it was on a gossip blog. CEO's mistress is daughter of accused predator. The comments were vicious. She sat in the lobby of Ward Tower, phone in hand, heartbreaking. She thought she'd healed. She thought she'd earned this. But shame always finds a way back. A hand touched her shoulder. Grayson. He didn't speak. Just walked her to the car, drove in silence, took her to the only place where walls didn't watch. His family's lake house, empty, quiet, safe. She stood on the dock, wind in her hair, and whispered, "I should have told you." He stepped beside her. "I should have told you," he said, "that I knew." And she turned, stunned. "I saw the file the first day you interviewed," he admitted. "But I also saw the girl in the photograph, and I remembered." Jenna's breath caught. "You remember me?" He nodded. "High school. You handed me 2 tickets to a fair after I failed my math test. Said, 'Don't give up on magic.' I never forgot." She stared at him. "This time. I've been waiting for you to remember too." She didn't speak, just reached for his hand. And this time, when their fingers touched, there were no rules left between them. Only truth. Only scars. And 2 people who finally saw each other completely. Chapter 4. The CEO's Enemy's Girlfriend. There's a certain kind of silence in a ballroom. It doesn't come from the absence of sound, the crystal laughter, the clicking heels, the soft clink of glasses. It comes from the moment a woman walks in, and everyone else stops breathing. That was the silence Jenna felt when she stepped into the gala. Ward Enterprises' annual Founders Night. 100 executives in gowns and black ties, champagne flowing, cameras flashing. And Jenna Cross, the whispered name of scandal, walked in wearing a black satin dress borrowed from Grayson's private stylist, her hair pinned like armor. He didn't meet her at the door. Of course not. He never made things easy. She stood near the entrance, clutching her silver clutch like a lifeline, scanning the crowd. His team had insisted she attend. "Grayson wants you visible tonight," his assistant said. "He wants you to be seen, beside him." But Grayson Ward was nowhere to be found. Only the stares were constant, sharp, judgmental, dripping with curiosity. She stepped into the room anyway, because that's what you do when you've walked through worse. She found him near the stage, flanked by executives and board members, listening half-heartedly to a logistics report. When he saw her, something flickered in his expression, something unreadable but real. He didn't smile, he didn't speak. He simply held out his hand. And Jenna, proud, angry, terrified Jenna, walked across the room and took it. Whispers grew louder. But his hand? It was warm, steady. "A clothes on," he murmured. "You're 30 minutes late." His lip twitched. I needed the moment to be worth watching. For an hour, she stood beside him like shadow and flame, quiet, dignified, dangerous in her elegance. He introduced her to board members, to PR heads, even to the chairman of an international tech firm. None of them questioned her anymore, not with the way Grayson spoke her name, not with the way he never let go of her hand. But power, as always, draws enemies. And tonight, the ghosts of her past came dressed in diamonds. She saw him before he saw her. Jiang Han, tall, sharp suit, the same smirk that once made her 17-year-old heart skip. He hadn't changed, except now, he walked like he owned everything, even his mistakes. And on his arm, in a red backless gown, was So Zhao. The woman Jenna remembered from press leaks and whispered warnings. Cold, brilliant, jealous. The woman who'd orchestrated the USB scandal, the one Grayson had crushed quietly but never confronted publicly. Now here she was, gliding across the ballroom like a queen unbothered by consequence. And when she reached them, her voice was honeyed venom. Gray. And Jenna Cross. What a surprise. Jenna didn't flinch. She'd faced worse. Grayson said coolly, "I assumed you'd be in Dubai." "I flew back for the event," she said, smiling too sweet. I couldn't miss watching her try to play Cinderella. Jenna opened her mouth, but Grayson beat her to it. "You mean the woman who broke your silence with a single spreadsheet?" he said, raising a brow. "Yes, she tends to have that effect." The smirk vanished from Jiao's face. "Careful, Grayson. Some of us keep better receipts than others." Jiang Han chuckled beside her. "Still cleaning up after your little assistant?" Grayson turned to him slowly. His voice dropped an octave. "Still riding my company's coattails." The air went sharp. Jiao stepped closer to Jenna, voice low, almost too soft to hear. "Be careful who you tie yourself to, Jenna. Men like him only sleep beside women they plan to." Jenna met her gaze. "Then maybe he finally found someone worth dying for." Jiao blinked. Jenna turned her back, and Grayson, without hesitation, followed her into. Later that night, under the amber glow of the penthouse lights, Jenna stood barefoot on the balcony, arms folded against the wind. Grayson joined her quietly, 2 glasses in hand. He offered one. She took it. "I didn't know they'd be there," he said. "I did," Jenna replied. "People like them always show up to watch the fire." He said nothing. "I knew Jiang Han would humiliate me one day. But So Jiao," she exhaled. "She doesn't want me gone, she wants me erased." Grayson studied her. "She won't get either." She turned to him. "Why me, Grayson?" He tilted his head. "I'm not graceful. I'm not rich. I'm not safe. And if the world keeps digging up my past, you'll bleed for standing beside me." He looked at her for a long time. Then he stepped closer. Because you're the only person who never wanted anything from me but the truth, he said. And because every time the world claws at you, you don't break. You rise. Jenna's eyes stung. I was never trying to impress you. I know, he whispered. That's why you do. He set down his glass, reached into his jacket, and pulled out a photograph. She took it, heart racing. It was a candid, faded high school. She stood at a gate, laughing, arms outstretched, holding 2 amusement park tickets. Grayson younger, awkward, caught in the corner of the frame, staring at her like she was sunlight. She covered her mouth. I carried that picture through college, through mergers, through loss, he said. Every woman I ever met after you reminded me of what she wasn't. Jenna's hands trembled. Why now? She asked. Why not then? He smiled faintly. I wasn't brave enough. She met his eyes. I'm not either. Then let's be afraid together. And for the first time, no contracts, no rules. She kissed him. Not because she was his cure. Not because he was her protector. But because in that moment, they were just 2 people who remembered each other completely. Chapter 5. The USB that broke her. Some betrayals don't come with blood. Some come as silence, in a hallway you've walked 1,000 times. It happened on a Wednesday, just after lunch. Jenna was walking back from the design floor, coffee in one hand, a folder in the other. The building buzzed as usual, polished heels on tile, soft chimes of elevator bells, clipped voices echoing down glass corridors. And then, everything stopped. A hand gripped her arm, firm, unfamiliar. Miss Cross, you'll need to come with us. 2 men in gray suits, security. Behind them, a woman from HR, her lips pressed into a line so thin it disappeared. What's going on? Jenna asked. They didn't answer. One of them held up a clear evidence bag. Inside, her USB. Only, it wasn't hers. 23 minutes later, Jenna sat in the HR conference room under a blistering row of white lights. Across the table, a compliance officer, a legal rep, and a printed document with a time-stamped security. You were seen entering the executive server room at 11:48. A woman from legal said, flipping through a packet. Unscheduled, unauthorized. A minute later, this USB was plugged into the mainframe. Internal documents were copied. Jenna blinked. That's not my USB. You were the only person captured on the hallway cam, compliance added. No other employees logged in during that time. Her mind raced. Check the elevator, the break room. Someone bumped into me. My bag was open. The HR woman looked unconvinced. You're suggesting someone planted it on you? I'm saying I didn't do it, Jenna said, louder now. You can check my badge history. I've never even accessed that floor alone. We already did, legal replied. Today was the first time. Jenna's breath caught. She looked at the camera in the corner, silent, watching. And in her chest, a cold, sick truth began to form. This was planted. This wasn't a mistake. This was war. That night, Grayson didn't come. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't storm in like he had during the first scandal. And for the first time in weeks, Jenna sat alone in her apartment, the silence louder than any courtroom. The screen of her phone glared at her. Still no word. What if he believes them? The thought hollowed her out. He had defended her name once. But this time the evidence was too clean. Too perfect. She poured herself a glass of water with shaking hands. She hadn't cried, not yet. She didn't deserve to. Because she should have known this city didn't offer second chances. It offered traps with better lighting. The next morning, they told her to work from home until further notice. Which was code for, "You're already guilty. We're just waiting for your signature to make it official." She packed her desk in silence, as no one said goodbye. Only one person stopped her at the elevator. Pecker, the junior copywriter from marketing. Kind, soft-spoken, always nervous in meetings. She reached out, squeezed Jenna's arm. "I know it wasn't you." Jenna blinked. "How?" Becky swallowed. "Because bad people don't stay late helping interns fix slide decks. They don't bring extra umbrellas. They don't survive everything you've survived and still show up." Jenna's throat tightened. "Thank you." Becky looked like she wanted to say more, but the elevator dinged and the moment was gone. She didn't go home. She didn't know where she went. She walked, blocks and blocks through downtown Atlanta, past the coffee shops, the skyscrapers, the flashing crosswalks. She ended up in front of the courthouse, not by intention, but by some cruel twist of memory. The same courthouse her father's case had been tried in, the same one she swore never to walk near again. And for the first time in a long time, Jenna let herself cry. Not because she was weak, but because she was tired. Of fighting, of defending, of always being the girl no one fully believed. That evening, her doorbell rang. She didn't move. It rang again. When she opened it, Grayson stood there, rain in his hair, coat soaked through. He said nothing, just held up a flash drive. Jenna stared at it. "This is from the west hallway camera," he said, voice low. "The one the board didn't check." Her pulse quickened. "I found the real footage. Someone switched it during submission, and you were right." He stepped forward. "A woman bumps into you, drops something in your bag. Her face is obscured, but—" Jenna cut in. He nodded. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew it." Grayson's jaw clenched. "She wanted you out of the company, out of my life. She's been watching you since the gala." "And you believe me now?" Jenna asked, her voice shaking. "I believed you the whole time," he said, "but I needed to be sure, because the moment I go to war for you, Jenna, I don't hold back." The next day, Ward Tower buzzed with a storm of emails. A private investigation, a leaked security file, a public apology to Jenna Cross. And most shocking of all, So Jiao's resignation, effective immediately. Grayson handled it all with surgical precision. But when it came to Jenna, he hesitated. He stood outside her office that afternoon, staring through the glass. She was back at her desk, typing, headphones on, the world watching her again. She looked up, saw him, and for once, she smiled. Not because the storm was over, but because this time he stayed. That night, as they lay side by side again, Jenna whispered into the dark, "Why did you really come back?" Grayson didn't answer at first. Then, "Because I couldn't stand the idea of you thinking you were alone." She turned to him. "Am I still just a contract to you?" He looked at her. Olivia nodded. He said, "You're the only thing in this life that wasn't written in ink." And for the first time, she reached for him. Not out of duty, not for comfort, but because she chose to. Chapter 6. The Truth That Can't Be Buried. Some truths live in silence. Others live in shame. But the deepest kind, the kind that never stops hurting, lives in the space between a father's last word and a daughter's first question. It started with a headline. CEO's partner linked to historic scandal. Jenna didn't have to open it. She already knew. The father's name, the accusations, the old court records that never cleared, never closed. It had taken one reporter, one old tip, and now the past she had buried was clawing its way to the surface. Again. She sat at the kitchen table of Grayson's lake house, phone face down, coffee untouched. Grayson entered from the hallway, shirt unbuttoned at the cuffs, hair still damp from the shower. He saw her face. He didn't need to ask. "I printed it?" he said quietly. She nodded. He picked up her phone, read the first few lines, then set it down. Calm, still. But behind, "I can fix it," he said. "No," Jenna's voice cracked. "Don't," Jerome asked. Jenna. I'm tired of being someone you have to defend. His jaw tensed. You're not. You're someone I choose to stand beside. She shook her head. You don't know what they're going to say, Grayson. About me, about my family, about who I am. He stepped forward, gently cupped her face. I know exactly who you are. But she pulled away. Because even love can feel like pressure when the whole world is watching. The next day, the press frenzy exploded. News outlets hounded her outside Ward Tower. Online forums dissected her photos. She's playing the sympathy card. She seduced him. She's a scandal magnet. Like father, like daughter. Jenna stood in the elevator lobby that afternoon, eyes glazed, spine stiff. Her badge wouldn't scan. Your access is being reviewed, a young intern stammered. She didn't speak. Didn't need to. Grayson arrived 10 seconds later. No one revokes her access but me, he said coldly, and I never will. The intern turned pale, buzzed her through. They rode the elevator in silence. Then Grayson spoke, voice low, controlled. I've been quiet out of respect, but this ends now. What are you going to do? Jenna asked, barely above a whisper. He looked at her, gaze steady. Clear your father's name. That night, Grayson opened a private case file in his study, sealed for 10 years, locked under non-disclosure orders, buried by powerful names. He called in a retired judge, a forensic analyst, the woman who had once taught Jenna in high school, the one who had testified under oath with a story that never sat right. Piece by piece, the puzzle returned. The victim's original testimony described a scene involving a chair with a high wooden back. But Jenna's father had tutored students in a room with only folding metal stools, no wooden chairs, no backs. And the date of the incident? It was the same weekend he had driven Jenna to her debate championship out of state. The tournament's photos, time-stamped, geotagged, proved it. Grayson stared at the evidence. Quiet. Angry. I buried this, he muttered, because the truth was inconvenient. Jenna stood in the doorway, trembling. This won't matter to them, she said. It's too late. He's already gone. It matters to me, Grayson said, because you still carry it, and I refuse to let shame be the only thing your father leaves you. 2 days later, Grayson held a press conference. No lawyers. And no PR filters. Just him, standing beside Jenna, eyes on every camera. My name is Grayson Ward, he said, and I believe in truth, especially the kind that gets forgotten when headlines sell better than facts. He laid out the case, the dates, the files, the discrepancies. He named no accuser, no insult, just proof. Then he said Jenna's name. Not like a defense, but like a promise. She is not her father's shadow. She is her own light. And if you can't see that, then maybe your eyes have never known what real character looks like. Jenna stood beside him, silent, trembling, and seen. The next morning, someone left a bouquet outside her apartment. No note, just one line on the tag. I believe you then. I believe you now. In the days that followed, the headlines softened. Some retracted, others didn't. But something shifted, not in the news, in Jenna. She walked through Ward Tower without flinching. She took meetings. She spoke clearly. She didn't apologize anymore, because the shame wasn't hers to carry. One night, after a long day, she found Grayson on the rooftop. He stood near the railing, shirt sleeves rolled, drink in hand. She stepped beside him, said nothing. He didn't look at her. I keep thinking about that photo, he said. The one from high school? He nodded. I wanted to tell you, back then, that you changed me, but I didn't know how. You just did. They stood in silence. Wind brushed her hair across her face. He reached out, tucked it behind her ear. And then he whispered, I love you, Jenna. She blinked. I've loved you since you handed me those 2 tickets and said, Don't give up on magic. I didn't know it then, but I do now. She swallowed hard. Like me. Because you weren't afraid to see me, and you weren't afraid to let me see you, scars and all. She stepped into his arms, pressed her forehead to his chest, and for the first time in her life, the truth didn't hurt. It healed. The girl from my lens. There are photos that capture a moment. And then there are the ones that capture a person, the part of them the world never sees, the softness they guard like treasure. Grayson had one. He'd kept it in the back of his wallet for 10 years. A faded photo, slightly bent at the corners, a girl in a school uniform holding 2 carnival tickets, smiling with all the courage she didn't know she'd need. That girl had been Jenna. She just didn't know it yet. The night he showed it to her, the air in the penthouse had felt different. Warmer, calmer, like something heavy had finally been set down. Jenna sat curled on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, barefoot in one of his white button-down shirts. Grayson stood across from her, the photo in his hand, quiet, nervous in the way powerful men rarely are. "Why I said you loved me once," he said softly. "I didn't mean it to hurt you." Her eyes lifted. "You didn't." He knelt, handed her the photo. She took it, slowly. The moment she saw it, she froze. "That's me. Outside a state fair in Savannah. You gave me those tickets after I failed my math midterm. Said I needed to believe in something fun again." "I barely remember that day," she whispered. "I remember everything," he said. She looked up. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I wasn't the kind of man who deserved the girl in that photo. Not yet." She studied the image. The way she laughed with her whole body, the brightness in her eyes. A younger version of herself who hadn't yet learned to flinch at every good thing, who hadn't been humiliated or abandoned or accused. The girl, she said, touching the photo, was brave, stupid maybe, but hopeful. "She still is," Grayson said. "She's just forgotten." Jenna blinked fast. "Why did you keep this?" "Because I knew," he said, "if I ever lost my way, she'd be the one to bring me back." Later that night, they lay side by side, not touching, but closer than they'd ever been. The lights were off. The silence between them was soft now. Not distance, just calm. Jenna whispered, "Grayson? Were you looking for me all this time?" He turned to her, voice rough. "I wasn't looking for anyone, but every time I walked into a room, I hoped you'd be in it." She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years fell asleep without fear. The next day, Jenna received a call she never expected. Springfield Gazette, a small-town reporter, said she'd heard about the reopened case and wanted to interview Jenna, not about the scandal, but about what surviving looked like. Jenna hesitated. "Why me?" The woman answered, "Because most people who get shamed disappear. You didn't." And yes, the article ran 3 days later under the title, "She Didn't Run, The Quiet Courage of Jenna Cross." It didn't go viral. It didn't trend. But Becky from marketing printed it and pinned it to the staff bulletin board. And Grayson framed it, hung it in the corridor outside his private office. A week later, Grayson invited Jenna to his home in Charleston, the place he grew up, the place he never took anyone. It was a white colonned estate just outside the city, wrapped in moss-draped oaks and old secrets. Jenna stood in the doorway, struck by how still it felt. "No one lives here?" she asked. "I visit once a year," he replied. "On the day my father died." She looked at him. "That was the last day you slept." He nodded. They walked the grounds, past a dried-up fountain, a row of rocking chairs, and old work shed. "This is where I took the photo," he said, pointing to a hill behind the house. "That was the camera, and you were standing right here." Jenna walked to the spot. The air smelled of pine and salt and memory. She turned to him. "Was I what you remembered?" "No," he said. She frowned. "You were more." That night, he kissed her like a man who had waited a lifetime. It wasn't hurried. It wasn't staged. It was quiet, slow, honest. And when they made love, it wasn't desperate. It wasn't reckless. It was healing. Jenna cried afterward, not from pain, not from shame, but because, for the first time, she felt chosen. Not for what she survived, not for who her father was, not for how well she could stay silent, but because she had been seen and loved anyway. The next morning, Grayson found her sitting on the porch, blanket around her shoulders, watching the sunrise. He sat beside her, handed her a mug of black coffee. She smiled at him, sleepy, bare-faced, safe. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what? Nothing's gonna take this away." He looked at her for a long time, then said, "Even if the whole world burns down, I'll still be sitting right here, with you." She leaned her head against his shoulder and whispered, "Then, I think I'm finally home, much after 8. So, Gyota's last trap." The trap wasn't loud. It didn't come with sirens or legal threats. It came with silence, with precision, with the kind of cruelty that waits for joy and then strikes. 2 weeks after Charleston, Jenna returned to Ward Tower with something unfamiliar in her chest. Peace. She no longer feared the elevator's reflection, no longer winced at whispers. Even the headlines had gone quiet. Her father's name finally cleared by both public record and private truth. Grayson was different too. Softer at the edges, still powerful, still respected, but now his gaze lingered longer when he looked at her. His hand found hers in passing, his voice gentler in meetings when she offered ideas. They weren't hiding anymore, and that made them a threat. It happened at the Warden Partners product launch. A massive event, live-streamed, covered by every media outlet in the Southeast. Jenna, now interim director of brand strategy, had been chosen to co-present with Grayson, her first public-facing event in years. She wore navy, a structured dress, minimal jewelry, clean lines. "You look like the CEO," Grayson had whispered backstage, adjusting her mic. "I thought you were the CEO," she teased. He leaned in. "I know who runs this company." They stepped on stage together. And for the first time, Jenna felt she belonged to the future. But the moment the cameras rolled, the trap was sprung. In the middle of Jenna's segment, a woman in red strode down the aisle, heels clicking like gunshots. "Sujao," muttered Volume. Security moved, but she raised her badge, still valid from her former board membership. Then she turned to the press row, pulled a microphone from her purse, and said, "Before you all invest in Ward's shiny new future, perhaps you'd like to meet the real Jenna Cross." Gasps. Cameras pivoted. Flashes exploded. Jenna froze. Her throat went dry. Grayson stepped forward. "Security." But Joe raised a hand, calm, controlled. "I have no intention of disrupting your launch," she said smoothly. "I simply believe in transparency. Isn't that what good leaders do?" Then she turned to Jenna. "You lied about who you were," she said. "You hid your name, your past, your father's scandal. You manipulated sympathy and leveraged power." Jenna didn't move. Not until Jiao lifted a folder, a sealed juvenile report. "I have here a suppressed transcript showing Ms. Cross was removed from her high school after allegations of physical altercations." "That's enough," Grayson snapped, stepping between them. "No," Jenna said, voice shaking but loud. "Let her finish." Jiao smiled. "Are you sure, dear? Truths tend to sting." "I've lived through worse." The room was dead silent. Jenna turned to the cameras, her palms, but she stood tall. "While I was 16, she said, I shoved a boy into a locker because he wouldn't stop groping girls in the hallway." Gasps. "I didn't report it, I just reacted. The school chose to handle it quietly. My father took the blame, and the press like now made sure we never forgot." She paused, met Jiao's eyes. "But here's the truth you can't bury under shame. I don't regret defending myself, or anyone else. Then she looked at the press. You want a quote? Here it is. I've been many things, a scared girl, a reckless one, even a silent one. But I've never been a liar. She stepped off the stage. Grayson followed without hesitation. The room erupted not in scandal, but in applause. Because when a woman tells her truth without flinching, even power listens. Backstage, Jenna collapsed into a chair, trembling. Grayson crouched beside her, took her hand. How'd you stop me? He whispered. Because if I keep letting you shield me, she said, I'll never believe I deserve to stand beside you. He kissed her hand. Gently. We already do. That night, Kiao was removed from all remaining holdings, her badge revoked, her public support collapsed. But the real victory didn't come in her defeat. It came later, in Jenna's inbox. Message. No subject line. Just this. My name is Carla. You don't know me. I was the girl in that hallway. Thank you for what you did back then. I never got to say it, but you saved me. I'm a mother now. My daughter's safe because you weren't. Jenna stared at the screen, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Grayson walked in, paused, saw her crying, and moved toward her instantly. She turned the laptop. He read the message, slowly, then pulled her to his chest. They stood in silence, no words. Just breath, just history, just healing. Later in bed, Grayson asked, Do you still wish I'd spoken up sooner? Jenna shook her head. While you were gone, she whispered, I might have met the boy, but I'd have missed the man. The press, the proposal, the past. The rain fell like a secret that morning, soft, constant, as if the sky couldn't decide whether to break or heal. Jenna stood at the window of Grayson's penthouse, wrapped in one of his shirts, staring down at the Atlanta skyline. Everything looked the same, but everything inside her had changed. They'd survived the scandal, cleared her father's name, exposed Sojiao. But it wasn't peace she felt now, it was weight. A weight that comes when you realize the next step is no longer about survival. It's about choice. Grayson came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "Any for your thoughts," he murmured against her. She leaned into him. "You don't want them." "I do." She turned, looked up at him. "You've done everything for me, protected me, fought for me, even believed in me before I believed in myself. But this, us, it scares me more than anything." "Why?" he asked, his voice low. "'Cause it's the first time I don't know how to win. I don't know how to be loved back." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled away, gently, and reached into his jacket pocket. Small black box. Jenna's breath caught. He opened it. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant, no grand gem, no garish shine, just a single band of brushed gold. Engraved inside, "Don't give up on magic." Her words, from a lifetime ago, from a version of herself she'd long forgotten. He knelt, not because it was performative, but because it was true. "Jenna Cross," he said, "I don't want a perfect life. I don't want a clean one. I want this. The mess, the scars, the history. I want the girl who handed me those tickets. I want the woman who never stopped fighting, and the nights where we barely sleep, and the mornings where we just breathe." He held up the ring. "Marry me, not because I saved you, but because we saved each other." She couldn't speak. The tears choked everything. So she nodded and whispered, "Yes." The news broke within the hour. Grayson Ward proposes to Jenna Cross after clearing her name in historic case. Some headlines were skeptical, others were cruel. But most were quiet. Because something about that image, him kneeling, her crying, the rain misting around them, didn't look staged. It looked real. Because it was. The next few days passed in a blur. 2 interviews, messages, congratulations. But the most unexpected moment came from a letter. Handwritten, delivered by courier, no return address. Jenna opened it carefully. Inside, on heavy cream paper, was a simple message. Jenna, I watched the press conference. I was wrong about your father, and I was wrong about you. I can't change what I said when I asked you to leave, but I hope this note can say what my voice never could. You deserved better. Jenna dropped into a chair, stunned. Not because her mother had written, but because her mother had apologized. Grayson found her like that, holding the letter like it might burn. He didn't ask. He just pulled her into his lap, held her while she cried and whispered, "We can forgive them without going back to who we were." That night, they didn't sleep. They lay in bed, hands entwined, speaking softly. About the wedding. About the future. About whether love like this could really last. And when Grayson touched the inside of her wrist, the place she used to hide when she was anxious, she said quietly, "I used to trace scars there in my mind." "I know," he replied. "I don't anymore." He brought her hand to his lips. "That's because they're healing," he whispered. "Because of you?" "I'll never forget that night," he said, "because of us." In the early hours of dawn, Jenna sat up and grabbed a pen. She pulled a small notebook from the nightstand and began to write. Not a contract, not a statement, just one sentence on the first page. "This is the story of how I learned I was never too broken to be loved." She tore it out, slipped it into Grayson's jacket pocket for him to find later, and curled back into his arms. Because sometimes the most powerful vow isn't spoken. We lived. Chapter 10. The Ring and the Real Sleep. There was no ballroom. No red carpet. No applause. Just candlelight flickering across wood-paneled walls, the quiet hush of a Georgia spring evening, and two people standing barefoot in the middle of a lakeside cabin, where love had finally stopped being complicated. Jenna Cross wore no veil, just a soft ivory dress, her hair in loose waves, her eyes brighter than he'd ever seen them. Grayson Ward wore no tux, just a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up and the ring she had already placed in his hand. Only 3 people stood with them: Marla from PR, who brought flowers, Becky from marketing, who cried before it even started, and Robert, the company's former driver, the one who'd once walked Jenna to the gate after her worst day, now officiating because a man who's driven billionaires can surely deliver a vow. It was small, unseen, and perfect. Grayson took her hand. "I spent a decade not sleeping," he said, "because every time I closed my eyes, I saw everything I lost. But then you walked in, furious, scared, brave, and said 5 words that changed my entire life." He smiled. "I want money for this." The room laughed softly. "I thought you were the storm," he continued, "but you were the roof. You were the warmth. You were the girl from a photo I never let go of." He slipped the ring on her finger, the one engraved with the line that had once made him believe in magic again. Jenna held his hand tightly. "I thought love was the thing that left," she said. "I thought it was something you had to beg for, prove yourself worthy of. But you," her voice cracked, "you looked at me like I wasn't broken. You stood behind me when the world wanted me buried. You never once asked me to be anything but me. And you made me believe that maybe, just maybe, love doesn't always leave." She placed the second ring on his finger. Smooth, simple, real. They didn't say, "I do." They just held each other. And the silence between them, once haunted, was now sacred. That night, they danced under string lights tied to pine trees. No music. Just Jenna humming something she barely remembered from childhood, and Grayson holding her like he'd never let go again. Later they lay in bed, candles flickering in the window, rain beginning to patter gently outside. "I can't believe we're married," Jenna whispered, cheek against his chest. "I can. I didn't even wear heels." "You didn't need to," he said. You already stood taller than anyone in the room." She laughed softly. And then, for a long time, nothing. No words. Just breathe. Just warmth. And sleep. Real sleep, the kind he hadn't known since he was 15. In the morning, Jenna woke first. Grayson was still beside her, deeply asleep, his arm draped over her waist, his face softer than she'd ever seen it. She didn't move, just watched. Watch a man once built entirely of walls sleep like he belonged in the world again. Later that day, they returned to Atlanta not as CEO and assistant, not as Scandal and Shield, but as partners. Their first board meeting as husband and wife ended with Grayson sliding her a folder labeled Crossword Foundation. "We girls like you used to be," he said, "before the world tried to break." Jenna blinked. "You named it after me?" He kissed her hand. "You gave me back my name. I thought I'd honor yours." 2 years later, there's a photo framed in their kitchen. It's not from the wedding. Not from a gala or a magazine cover. It's of Jenna sitting on the floor, in leggings and a messy bun, holding a newborn girl in her arms, whispering something no one else can hear. Grayson had taken it from the hallway, quietly in awe. He titled the photo, "The Real Sleep." Because that night, when their daughter finally stopped crying, when the house was dark and safe and still, he looked over at Jenna and said, "I think we're finally home." What it means to be chosen. Some people search their whole lives for the kind of love that walks in with flowers and fireworks. But the truest love doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives with silence. It arrives when someone stands beside you while the world turns its back. When they see you not despite your scars, but because of them. When they whisper, "You're safe now," and mean it. That's what Jenna Cross found. Not a man who saved her, but a man who stayed. A man who saw the version of her that even she had forgotten, the girl who gave away 2 fare tickets to a boy with tired eyes, never knowing that kindness would echo back 10 years later in the form of a ring, a vow, and a second chance at home. And she never wanted the title. Not the headlines, not Mrs. Ward. All she ever wanted was to stop running. And finally she did. Not because the world stopped trying to break her, but because she no longer let it. She chose love on her terms, in her time, with someone who didn't need to be convinced she was worth it. So if you're reading this, and you've ever been told you're too complicated, too scarred, too hard to love, remember this. You don't need to be simple to be chosen. You don't need to be perfect to be held. And the kind of love that's real, the kind that lasts, won't ask you to shrink. It will ask you to stay. If you've ever been Jenna, if you've been abandoned, doubted, or told to hide your story, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Because somewhere, someone else is still in the middle of their story. And your voice might be the one that makes them believe in magic again. Thank you for watching. And remember, real love doesn't just save you. It lets you sleep.